Hey guys, a lot of people have asked me to make a video, give my thoughts, etc. about Trisha Paytas coming out as transgender. I've been going back and forth about it, not because I don't want to make a video. I think I just want to make sure that I say things that correctly articulate like how I feel about the situation and are really communicated well, because a lot of times when I've made videos about Trisha Paytas, people have thought that I was on Trisha Paytas's payroll and that I felt like, or they felt like I was like kissing her ass and all of these things. I just want to be clear that I have really been impacted by this, and I've been impacted today in general. I don't know like why I can feel like myself getting emotional, but if y'all didn't know, today, October 8th, the Supreme Court, the highest court in the United States, has heard the case for 3 individuals who were fired from their jobs for either being trans. There was a trans woman named Amy Stevens who was fired from her job and is fighting back, obviously, through the court system. And there were 2 gay men whose names escape me currently at this moment, who were also a part of that case and that suit. And so this is like a pivotal time in our country for LGBTQ Americans in terms of being able to solidify their futures and their livelihoods and their jobs. Like, there are so many states, if you're not gay, you might not know this, or if you're not a queer person, you might not know this, but there are so many states where you can legally be fired for being gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender. I think it just has me emotional, and then having so many people be talking about an LGBTQ identified potentially person on YouTube and having people question whether that is a valid identity for this person or not. It's just a lot. So I want to be clear that I am very critical of the Trisha Paytas video. I have no intentions of kissing Trisha's ass in this video. I have no intentions of not sharing my true feelings and opinions on this, because I do have a lot of opinions about this topic. So the first thing I want to say is that I watched both of the Trisha Paytas videos in regards to being transgender. I watched them all the way through. I'm not doing like a reaction. This is really just my 100% thoughts on what I saw. And before I get too far into this, I'm currently unclear about what pronouns Trisha wants to use currently, and that's okay. But what I will say is Trisha specifically said that Trisha doesn't believe that they is an appropriate pronoun for people, and that they can only mean plural. So I'm saying this one because I may use the wrong pronouns. For the most part, I'm gonna try to just say Trisha and not say she, he, they, or any other pronoun, because that I think is the safest bet. But to say that they is not a valid pronoun for people have been using the singular they for years, for centuries. I grew up in the rural Midwest, y'all, and people have said they to refer to singular people my whole life. I think we can respect people if that's how they want to be referred to. I say that for 2 reasons. One, that's one of my first major issues with like Trisha saying this and not having a grasp for what the transgender community does or uses. Obviously not every trans person uses the they pronoun, but a lot of people within the trans community do. And I think that that's valid, and I think that most other people in the LGBTQ community tend to respect that when folks say, I would like you to use they, them pronouns. All of that to say is I also want to say, and this again is not me kissing Trisha's ass, but one of the toughest things for any person coming out either as gay, bisexual, lesbian, transgender, non-binary, gender non-conforming, etc., is having people question the validity of your identity. I want to try to be thoughtful about that, not because I'm overly concerned about Trisha. I mean, Trisha is a person who makes lots of money from YouTube and social media, tons and tons of money, has access to therapy and things like that. But I just want to say, I'm not saying this necessarily, I don't want to get rid of Trisha's feelings in this, but I mostly say that because there are a lot of people who are not in Trisha's shoes who have people who are questioning their identity every single day. And so I think it'd be really hypocritical for me to say, believe everybody when they tell you who they are, what their identity is, and then to say, well, I don't believe Trisha. I think we have to believe everybody, and I want to validate folks. Now, that doesn't mean I don't understand why people are questioning Trisha. She's a known troll. It's happened time and time again. One time Trisha had a video and I actually unsubscribed, and I'm kind of questioning why I didn't say unsubscribe then, but Trisha had a video where Trisha said that they were black, right? Trisha has said that she was a lesbian before. Trisha has done a lot of trollish behavior on YouTube, and I think that that's important to know. Like, I've seen a lot of people saying Trisha is like the little boy who cried wolf and made up all of these things over time on YouTube and is now frustrated because people don't believe a thing that comes out of Trisha's mouth. And I think that that is probably fair for people to feel because people have followed Trisha for a long time, but I do still want to validate that Trisha could be transgender. And I will also say I'm going to be very pissed if Trisha comes out and says, this is not who I am, because at this point, I feel like Trisha has committed and, I want to respect that as an identity. Now, here's where the part where I am critical comes in, because Trisha had the nerve to utilize the word ally a lot throughout both videos that were posted on Trisha's channel. And I'm really of the belief that if you are an ally, that is not something that you get to bestow upon yourself, right? To a community. If you're an ally, that's something that other people bestow upon you, and it's usually based on your actions. I know a lot of people also think about the word ally as a verb instead of a noun, because being an ally involves some kind of action, right? It involves you doing stuff to demonstrate that you are an ally. It's frustrating, and I think that this is what a lot of people in the LGBTQ community felt when they watched this video. I'm speculating because I can say this is what I felt, is that if you're going to say that you're an ally to this community, how are you going to go do all these things that are contradictory to what our community is, to what people within our community are? And that's the part that frustrates me. I'm prepared to validate all identities because at the end of the day, Trisha being transgender doesn't impact me. That's Trisha's life. What does impact me is the way that Trisha is an ally to other people and talks about our community. And that is what bothers me. Gigi Gorgeous, who is a trans woman on YouTube, made a video about this and talked about this as well. So I encourage you to go watch Gigi's video. But one of the things that was the most problematic that Gigi did a good job of talking about is that Trisha throughout the video talked about people being partially trans or completely trans and base those conversations on the amount of surgery that a person has. Now, one thing that Trisha said that was correct at some point in the video is that being trans doesn't always involve transitioning medically. Being trans can look a lot of different types of ways. That is all true. Not everybody who is trans has access to medically transitioning. Some people have access but choose not to medically transition, and that doesn't invalidate who they are as a trans person. That seems to really play into what a lot of the media used to be when it came to transgender people. Like, I remember one time watching an interview, I think it was Katie Couric, and I think she was interviewing Laverne Cox and Carmen Carrera, two people who are both trans women. And Katie Couric asked these really uncomfortable questions about their genitalia. And we don't ask that question to cisgender people, right? So why are we asking that question to transgender people? It was really gross that Trisha was talking and focusing so much on these other people that Trisha is hooked up with and their genitalia and how far they have or have not medically transitioned. Because that's not what being transgender is about. It's about feeling comfortable in being who you are. It's about, identifying with the gender that you feel like you were born to be. So one of the things that Trisha did was talk about how a person was a transgendered, put the ED on the end, or would talk about how somebody was a transgender, and those are not really correct ways to utilize the word transgender. Transgender is a modifier, it's an adjective. It's not a verb, it's not a noun. So when you refer to people as a transgender, that's like really objectifying them, like they're an object, they're a noun. And when you say that somebody is transgendered, it makes it sound like something is physically happening to them, like there is an action taking place to this person. And transgender is really just a adjective that describes an aspect of a person's identity. And so for me, that's always like, whenever I hear somebody say transgendered or a transgender, I always cringe because I don't necessarily think that that person is hateful. It's just clear that they don't have an understanding of what they're talking about. And so I think some people are like shooting up red flags about that as well. I think Trisha also utilized like the worst stereotypes about people. And I think it more spoke to just issues that Trisha has had with straight cisgender men as opposed to anything that really has to do with being transgender. Trisha mentioned that gay men are sensitive and sweet and that straight men are not. Like, what a ludicrous statement to make. Like, I know so many sweet, respectable straight men in my life, and I know some rude, terrible gay men as well. Trisha was just like leaning into the weird stereotypes that exist about gay men, straight men, men in general. Trisha said at one point, I wish I had so my assertiveness would be respected and I wouldn't be thought of as a bitch. And that, again, to me is just like, that sounds more so like you're frustrated with the way that women are treated in general, as opposed to actually having this concept of like wanting to be a man because that's who you feel like you are. Does that make sense? I don't know, it might not. But things like that, like where Trisha was focused on the way men are treated and the way women are treated, just I think sent up a lot of red flags to people because there are a lot of trans people who are not treated well. Like, being trans does not mean that you get treated well by most people. So it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. Trans people face a lot of adversity. They get treated poorly by other people. And so for Trisha to be making these statements that like, oh, I would just be treated better if I was a man, like, I don't think that that is necessarily the case, especially as somebody in the LGBTQ community, especially as a trans person. Trans people face all kinds of violence, much higher violence rates against trans people than comparatively to other folks, even within the LGBTQ community, let alone like amongst the straight population. So overall, I do just want to say that Trisha can be trans, could also just be gender fluid, gender non-conforming, non-binary. I think all of those identities are valid, and I want to uphold that. But I am not here for fake allyship where you claim to have all these people in your life that you care so much about, and then you can't speak to anything about the LGBTQ community with any kind of accuracy, self-awareness, or knowledge. And I know everybody's on their own journey, and I respect that. I certainly didn't know everything there was to know about my community when I came out. I feel like I'm still learning every day, and I want to respect that that's a thing. But I also think that when you do have a platform, when you do have millions of subscribers, when you have people like my dumb ass who pay money to go to your shows and buy your merchandise, I think you do have some level of responsibility when you're making an announcement like this to say it with some kind of knowledge. I guess all of this to say is I just want trans people, other LGBTQIA people to feel valid, and I think that this has potentially stirred up a lot of feelings for a lot of folks who are questioning. One thing I've always appreciated about YouTube is that there has been an avenue to see LGBTQ folks on the platform. I literally grew up watching, not grew up, but as long as Tyler Oakley has been on YouTube, I've been watching him, right? And so for me, that was always like access to gay folks. People like Gigi Gorgeous have been on YouTube sharing their journey. I mean, these are just the two that most immediately come to mind because these are the folks that I've been following on YouTube. But there are so many other LGBTQ people who have shared their stories on YouTube, and there have been so many people like me who grew up in the middle of nowhere and didn't have access to LGBTQ folks and relied on things like YouTube to see themselves somewhere. And so I just don't want that to get lost. I don't want people to feel invalid. I feel like Trisha has always been somebody that I've acknowledged was a troll, and I just feel like I hope Trisha's not trolling here, and I hope Trisha hasn't done any damage to folks who looked up to her, you know? Like I said, I feel very emotional about this topic. It's an emotional day in the LGBTQ community. I just have a lot of friends. Like, once I left the rural Midwest, I was focused and driven on finding an LGBTQ community, and I've really strived to do that, and my spectrum of friends within the queer community that I have covers every letter. And I've talked about how I work at a college, and I've worked specifically with LGBTQ students as part of my work in a college in the past. This is something I care a lot about because I didn't have people in my real life that I could look to and get answers about what it meant to be trans or what it meant to be gay and what it meant to be in a gay relationship. I didn't have it. And I relied on things like YouTube to help me with that. And so that's why it's so important that Trisha is being honest and that Trisha is doing the research and putting out things into the world that are accurate. Because what if, I mean, I hope to God this isn't the case, but what if there is a trans viewer of Trisha's and this is what they see, and now they have to question, like, well, am I ever going to be completely trans, or am I wrong in thinking that I'm trans? It's just irresponsible to put something out there without all of the ducks in a row, you know? So, anyways, that's really all I have. I love you all so much. If you can, subscribe to my channel. Leave me some comments down below what your thoughts are. Please be respectful of trans and LGBTQ people. And yeah, that's all I got. Have a great day. Bye.